This is The Final Word with Jeff Lemon and Adam Collins. It's season 18, it's episode 7. It's brought to you by Morris Blackburn, the #1 plaintiff law firm in the Commonwealth of Australia. And it's been a busy week. There are a lot of busy weeks. This may be sort of kind of cricketing off season in an international cricketing sense, but it definitely isn't for everything else. The IPL's going on. We'll have our segment with Ben Jones at the end of the show. County Championships going on. We'll have that in segment 2, and we've got a bunch of news, curiosities, other bits from around the world. There is a test match happening, or one that just finished between Bangladesh and Zimbabwe as well. And you, Adam, have been very busy up and down the country. You interviewed the ECB boss, Richard Gould. That interview just came out. You've got Lawrence Booth, the Wisden editor, coming up later in the week because you just went to the Wisden dinner. It's dinner season. It's awards season. Everything's going on. Catch me up.
Yeah, it's been busy. It's been fun. Yeah, it's off season in some respects because we sort of view our IPL time as our chance to do other things. But bloody hell, it's felt like it's been
on season
for the last couple of weeks, especially around that Easter weekend. Back-to-back 4-day weeks as well. You know, when you're a kid, Jeff, you sort of think about the long weekends around Easter and so on as being these great things. Not quite so much when you got 2 little kids and you've got a lot of work to do. Sort of the vibe changes somewhat. We have been very nicely cited in the Wisden Cricketers Almanac. A few years ago, they described us as by far the best cricket pod of our kind or something like that. And this time around, in fact, I got it in front of me. It says, or it concludes by saying, it's worth noting that it wasn't just Jimmy's retirement reveal they missed out on. That's a bit about tailenders. Did Anderson choose to tell his own podcast he was hoping for a taste of franchise cricket? Did he? Heck, he scooped his own show by giving the story to Adam Collins. But then it seems appropriate that the last mention should go to The Final Word, which released over 250 eps in the year and remains the gold standard of cricketing podcasts. You know, that's a nice thing. That's a nice thing to have out there on the, in the enduring record of the game and the conscience of the game and that type of thing. So,
and
thank you to them.
In an era where the major global currency is probably going to collapse, the gold standard perhaps is more important than ever. Perhaps that's what we come back to. So there's variety. I think one of the things we try to offer on this show is variety. There will be ridiculous stories from 1882, and then there will be up-to-date analysis of what's happening now, like what happened in the Richard Gould conversation. That was good because we did the niceties a year ago when we interviewed him. We did the who are you, what's your story, and then this time you were like, right, issues, let's get into them. Pop. And he was good. He was willing to play ball.
Yeah, I like Richard. It's probably quite obvious that I have a warmth towards him because I've interviewed him so many bloody times now that, he knows what's kind of coming. But this was different because he also knew that there was lots to get through. And we only had 45 minutes, so we had to keep that pace. What I didn't want was him to filibuster me. I thought the best way to get around that is to go from topic to topic and dance around and get him moving quickly. And it worked okay. There's lots there to drive the conversation on, I reckon, in our wider week to week here. So it seems obvious to me there is there are various topics now where there is a difference of opinion between the ECB and Cricket Australia. So this Saudi money stuff's fascinating because we know that that's largely being pushed from Australia, from various sources in Australia. But as you would have heard in his answers, he's very much like that's really not anything to do with us. Similar on 2-tiered Test cricket, the story that, as he said himself, came out during the Border Gavaskar Trophy series. So, joined the dots there. He's the one who offered to me that he's not interested in 3-year cycles. So this is the idea of 2-tier cricket, which accelerates the 4-year cycle into 3. And it feels like, again, from the stories that have been written, some of the major broadcasters in Australia want to see England and India fill 2 of the 3 summers and only have to fill 1 other summer where it's less. Which is everybody else. You invite all the other kids that summer. That's you play 1 test against 7 nations each across that summer. Right. So, there's 2 big 3 summers in effect and 1 non-big 3 summer. Whereas Gould straight away said, no, I don't want that. We think 4 years is fine. Not saying that every answer that he gave was comprehensive, and he acknowledged that himself, that he danced around a few of the trickier topics. But it was good to do, and we've committed to doing it every year, so we'll get a chance to do that. And also, we'll talk to Todd Greenberg soon, another person who's been really good to you and me and has engaged with the podcast and engaged with us in other platforms. So we'll get a chance to, I guess, get his perspective on some of what Richard said, and that's healthy. It's good that we can have more of these conversations with the tape recorder running rather than them being done, I guess, on background or other ways in which information is gathered as journalists.
There's a fair bit of that. He did a long interview with Dan Brettig this week, which covers, most importantly, those same subjects as to whether they split Test cricket, which he sounds more like he thinks that's likely to happen.
Yeah.
And whether they take a bunch of money from Saudi Arabia, which he also sounds like he thinks is likely to happen, which feels like preemptive surrender to me, to say, oh, well, the Saudis are going to take over anyway, so we might as well make sure that we're in their good graces when it happens. The two-tiered cricket thing, he said, well, we want to keep playing the other countries, but we have to think about the evolution of the game. I would argue the evolution of the game is not getting smaller. That's not evolving. That's devolving. So I was pretty unimpressed by a bunch of the answers in that interview.
I just think that he's coming at this clearly from the perspective that there's an inevitability about these changes, and he's trying to safeguard against it. So I get where he's coming from, but it wouldn't be a landing point that like we would be comfortable on this show if, you know, this idea of the Saudi Super Series that goes around the world and cannibalizes the schedule yet further. If that's the give, then like that doesn't feel like there's much carrot and stick there, does there? It feels like there's a lot going on along those lines. And you're right about the sign that it sends, trying to grow the game and trying to have countries aspire to play Test cricket when did he say himself that
I'll throw in the quote here. It's
there's
really important.
There's a number of nations that he cites, which was a bit jarring, I think.
Here we go. It's really important that Test cricket continue to have more than just Australia, England and India, and that's incumbent on us. Fine. We want to continue playing New Zealand, South Africa, the West Indies, Pakistan, but we do have to be brave enough to consider whether scarcity will provide better results for Test cricket. Now, I know that's off the cuff, but that's already excluding a bunch of countries that are Test nations, who are the ones that Australia ignores and doesn't play anyway. And two, every other country has scarcity already. If you're going to argue that scarcity is good for the business model, well, South Africa have scarcity, New Zealand have scarcity, West Indies and Pakistan have scarcity. They don't play a lot of Test cricket. They're playing 2 Test series already everywhere between themselves. Teams like South Africa are playing 4 Tests, 6 Tests a year. Well, South Africa aren't playing, aside from the World Test Championship, until, next year?
They're not playing a single test in their home summer.
Yeah. So we've got scarcity. Scarcity has been achieved, achievement unlocked. Like, that's not the selling point. And it just seems incredibly naive to try to pitch that as the selling point.
Yeah, and look, I think we sometimes forget that there aren't just 6 or 7 teams in the World Test Championship as it is. I asked Richard Gould about hosting Bangladesh, and with respect, I think for a moment there, it took him a couple of seconds to clock that they're actually in the WTC. They're not in the Ireland, Zimbabwe, Afghanistan category. I think as he gave his answer, he remembered that that's the case. But scarcity should be more about the big 3 and less about the rest, as Manthorpe's called them before. What do you call them? The big small 3 and the small 9,
7,
whatever it is, small 7.
The small 7 became the small 9, I guess. Once they added Ireland and Afghanistan.
So it's worth reading that interview with Todd Greenberg in The Age on Saturday, I think it was, and other bits and bobs from the Wisden dinner, by the way. Our patron, Dan Foreman, who's a terrific fella, won the Wisden writing comp, which is a really special part of the book where they invite those. I think the frame is you need to not be a contributor to Wisden or not be a cricket journalist, basically. He wrote a beautiful essay about his club's 60th anniversary and about the passing of time, and yet the way that Sunday cricket feels, it's almost timeless in the way that there's these traditions and there's these processes that are gone through by captains managing the games to make sure that everyone gets a go and so on. And Dan, who I play a bit of Sunday cricket with at ODB, he was there at the dinner and he was recognised by the long room, and you could tell how special that was for him, having not worked in cricket as such, but having been so deeply invested in the game, to have a room like that with your sort of David Gower, Mike Atherton types, many, many others there, all looking in his direction and receiving that acclaim.
It's a nice moment for him. And there'll be a moment as well for some other final word people who cross the finish line. They're running the London Marathon this weekend. So Hayley Fuller's doing it, who runs everything. Ben White, Jonty Cook, Jake Smith, Simon Parsons, Becky Howie and George Selman. Some of them are also doing the Edinburgh Marathon or half marathon at the end of May, but they're doing the London Marathon as well. It's all fundraising for the Lord's Taverners. 10K is still open in Edinburgh if you want to come and join us, by the way.
Just to get a few more things around this. So during the Wisden dinner, Jeff, I realised that I double booked myself for a catch up with our Edinburgh runners and London runners on Zoom. So I went up into the home dressing room and took the start of the call up there with the honours board behind me, which I thought was a nice way to bring people into my world, albeit looking slightly ridiculous in a tux for a Zoom catch up when most people were kind of...
Be careful. Justin Langer did that and didn't work out well. Going into the home dressing room.
A few things about London. Yep, 7 runners. Hayley, the first of a number of extraordinary things that she's doing, where she completes the haggis at Edinburgh with the 5K, the 10K, the half marathon and the marathon all in 2 blocks. But yeah, Haley's done London before for us. And George Shamon from Storytime fame, Jeff. Let's not brush over that. He captained Scotland over 100 times, one of Scotland's finest ever cricketers, and a final word listener, friend of the show. There's a halfway mark. I'm going to read this out once. Listen carefully. There's a halfway mark Tav's watching spot. I'll be there with Rach and the girls for a bit to hopefully see some of our runners go by. So about mile 12 or 13, I guess. The corner of Queen Elizabeth Street and Tower Bridge Road, opposite the Tower Bridge Arms pub. And yeah, we're a month away from Edinburgh. I've got a long run planned today, Jeff. We're into that zone. I'm a little bit knackered having travelled the country yesterday to play an MCC game. Been out, having left the Wisden dinner. Felt like I had about 2 hours sleep and crossed the country to go to Yorkshire and play, which was a beautiful thing. We're nearing our finish line, and you'll be there, and I'll be there, and we'll all be there at Edinburgh. And if you want to do that 10K, tell me as soon as possible.
Some sad news during the week that Keith Stackpole has died. Such a big name in that Ian Chappell era. And it's interesting how some players are Chappelli era players and some less so. So Ian Redpath, who passed away recently, one of those as well. And Stacky and Redders were very much so closely associated with that sort of style of Australian play, that era, particularly the 70s, 72 Ashes. Big for Keith Stackpole. We talked about his 207 on Storytime a couple of times at least. And he was also, for me particularly, he was more a radio presence than he was a playing presence. Obviously wasn't alive while he was playing, but he was there for so many summers on the ABC with Jim doing his, here's Stacky coming back to sort of give you that fairly laconic sort of gruff assessment of whatever was happening out on the field at the time. It's been a good run for Keith Stackpole and someone who had a huge influence on Australian cricket. Yeah,
massive Melbourne Victorian identity. So yeah, there's the Test stuff, 43 matches and plays in that era, as you described there, where it's kind of Bill Lawry and the 60s, which is one type of Test cricket, which is often derided as quite a passive decade in relative terms. And in the 70s, which is anything but. And he bridges that quite neatly. Famously, he was there, wasn't he, when Bill Lawry was told that he would be dropped from the Test team as a fellow Victorian and opening partner there at the Vics. But yeah, in 1970-71, that Ashes series in question where Lawry's eventually punted, he makes that defining double hundred. The famous photo when he should have been run out on 13 or 14, I think, which appeared on the back page of the newspaper the next day, where he was comfortably out, given not out, and that mistake proved a big one. But yeah, 1972 Ashes, he led the runs for Australia, and there used to be a documentary that used to run on Fox when I was a kid about 72. I think it was mostly due to Bob Massey's debut, but they used to run it. It was an old ESPN thing, I think. And I used to remember watching that time and time again, and Keith Stackpole attacking, especially off the back foot, taking on short bowling in a day that was well before helmets. So that's that extra level of bravery that was required to play in that way. And as you say, Jeff, such a big personality on Sports World on Channel 7 through the 90s every Sunday morning with Bruce McAvaney doing the cricket updates. ABC radio, not only as a commentator, but around the groundsman, to the MCG with Keith Stackpole, to the Shield, Victoria playing New South Wales, and Stacky jumping in, giving a 60 or 90 second summary of what was going on and what we needed to know. He's linked to Collingwood, having had that career as a district cricketer. And look, so many of the cricketers in that era, they didn't just play for Australia. They always got back and played for their club, and Stackpole was a proud captain of Collingwood. His dad played in a flag for Collingwood just before World War II in the footy as well. And he spoke beautifully an interview that he did when Ian Redpath passed away a couple of months ago. I actually listened to that when standing on Victoria Park, which I thought at the time that was apt that I'll be listening to Keith Stackpole speaking about his old teammate when I was at Vic Park when you and I were about to record an episode of The Final Word, as it turned out. But yeah, now a great of that era passes away, an icon of Victorian cricket, a massive contributor to a fine Australian team. Keith Stackpole passing away at age 84.
Vale, we had an extraordinary finish in the Women's World Cup qualifiers, and I need to come back to this. It was a few days ago, but partly because it's something that we've been talking about on the show for a bit, the possibility for this to happen, and partly because it was just a wild finish to begin with. So I'm going to set this up in case people didn't have full attention on this. 2 spots. They've got 6 teams trying to get through to qualify for the World Cup in September. This is the 50 over World Cup. Pakistan belt all 5 opponents, sail through. So there's 1 spot to get. Thailand lost all of their games. Sad that they've dipped when they had that opportunity a couple of years ago that was botched when a qualifying tournament was called off during COVID when they were going really well. So Scotland beat the Windies and Thailand, but they lost to Bangladesh and Ireland, so they blew their chance. Ireland got that win and they beat Thailand, but didn't beat anyone else, so they blew their chance. So it's down to West Indies or Bangladesh to qualify in the last spot. Bangladesh have beaten Thailand, Ireland, Scotland, right? So they've got 3 wins in the bank. West Indies have beaten Bangladesh and Ireland. They're playing Thailand last, which would mean they'd be tied on 3 wins, but they need to make up a bunch of net run rate. And Bangladesh's last game was a pretty big loss to Pakistan, so there's a sliver. There's a tiny sliver of the door being ajar for net run rate. But they need a fast run chase, West Indies. So they win the toss and they get to bowl first, which is problem number 1 dealt with. They have Thailand 85 for 6, which is very, very helpful, but then they can't finish them off. You have Nadakan Chantam, who we've watched play a couple of blinding innings. She played so well against Pakistan out in Australia in that T20 World Cup, did some brilliant things in those exhibition games that they were playing before the Women's Premier League.
Yeah, she was a gun at Fairbreak as well, and she babysat Winnie once years ago. So, they're great value, the Thai team, and she was part of that crew of Fairbreakers who were very keen on hanging out with a young toddler at the time in Dubai and Hong Kong.
Well, she's comfortably Thailand's best bat. She's a class above the rest of what they've got. So she makes 66, largely batting with the tail, gets them to 167. This is a 50 over game, so West Indies are going to chase it, but they need to chase it in 10 overs in order to make up net run rate. Yeah. So they need to be making 16 and over here from the get-go. And Hayley Matthews sets out to do that. Goes nuts. Makes 70 off 29 balls, 11 fours, 2 sixes. Opening with Kiana Joseph, who makes 26 off 12. So they're up with the rate that they need, basically. Chanel Henry comes in at number 3, 48 off 17, hits 5 sixes, right? So wicket's irrelevant, except that it's a dot ball. Matthews gets out after 7 overs. Chanel Henry takes over at that point, scores 21 off the 9th over, 20 off the 10th over. They're not quite where they need to be. So they needed 167. They've got to 156. They're 11 runs short. But they haven't quite lost it yet, because this is the thing that we've talked about that was brought to our attention a few years ago, that if you take an extra over, but you can score a 4 or a 6 while, say, scores a level or you're 1 run behind, and you can get yourself to a higher score batting second, those runs count for net run rate. So you can actually improve your net run rate even if you've blown past your initial target. Sometimes you can pull it back. And in this case, it is possible for them to pull it back, right? So they need 167 after 10 overs, but they can also get through if they get to 171 in the 11th over. So they've got to either be a run behind their target and hit a 6, or have scores level and hit a 6. But they've got to make another 10 runs first in order to get scores level in this 11th over, right? It's all becoming very complicated at this point.
Yeah, and it's one of the quirks where net run rate, if I understand it correctly, deals in whole overs. So you're not dealing in like 10.4 or 10.5. Like 10.4 is as good as 10.6, if that makes sense. So, and this is where it all unravels here, isn't it? Because, well, as you're about to explain here, the interest that the Windies had at that point wasn't winning the game as quickly as they could. It was winning the game in that 11th over, making as many runs as they could. And we've seen this in T20 domestic cricket, but never with an extreme example, what you're about to go through here, where, well, I mean, they've basically missed out because she's hit the ball too well.
Well, so they've got... So the score that was set was 166. So they need to get to 165 or to 166.
That's right.
And then hit a 6. So in the 11th over, there's a single, there's a wicket, there's a 4, there's another single. So they're on 162. They've got 2 balls left, which means they either need a 3 or a 4, and then they need to hit a 6 off the last ball of the over. And with 2 balls to go, Stefani Taylor, who's just come in, tries to chip 4 down the ground and just gets onto it too nicely and hits it for 6 by mistake. Shades of KL Rahul in Chennai. Hits it over long on. And so in 10.5 overs, they've got 168 but they need 171.
Yeah.
So they miss out by 0.013% of net run rate.
They miss out by one run, don't they, in effect? I mean, I think one more run would have...
I think they needed three more.
Three more runs. So Matthews hitting the 6, it was explicitly against the interest
Stefani
of...
Taylor.
Stefani Taylor, my apologies. Yeah. So had she knocked it on the head... no, she wouldn't have...
She needed 3 or 4. She needed 3 or 4 from that ball in order to get them to a point where they could get to 171 with a 6.
So a 4 would have been fine.
Effectively, she needed a 4 and then a 6.
Not a 6.
She tries to chip the 4 over long on, but chips it for 6 instead.
Did she realise? I haven't seen the highlights. I've only read the match report. Did she realise in the moment that she'd cooked it, or did it take?
I think so.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure she knew what she had to do. The commentary didn't. The commentary was like, "What's happening here? What does this mean? They've won, but have they won well enough?" So, obviously 3 was unlikely in that sort of context and would have given up the strike. But the wild part here is Stefani Taylor is not a 6-hitter. She's hit 32 sixes in 165 ODIs. That's not how she plays her game. Over the last 4 years, almost 1,000 runs in 38 matches. She's hit 84s in that time, and she's hit 1-6 in those 4 years until the other night when she accidentally hit the one that she hit. So, yeah, and is that her last ODI? I mean, they're not qualifying for the World Cup. They won't be there for the first time since 2000. Does she pull the pin at that stage? Hayley Matthews, Christ, how does she swallow that? She was the top wicket taker in the tournament, 4th highest run scorer. She's carrying that West Indies team more than Siva Brunt for England or Adipatu for Sri Lanka at the moment. And, I mean, the frustration there must be, she must just be boiling over.
Yeah, look, on one level, look, the Windies made the T20 World Cup semi-final last year, so they don't feel to me like the basket case that they felt a few years ago, and that's because Hayley Matthews has become, along with Nat Siva Brunt, the most dynamic all-rounder in the world, right? So she is carrying that Windies team, but she's got the experience. Stefani Taylor's a great example of that, where there are other match winners and World Cup winners in the squad still there from 2016. But really, Pakistan and Bangladesh should be going through. This is a tournament played in their conditions, and I know that Bangladesh nearly fluffed their lines here as well. But you look at it and you zoom out from it. This was a tournament that was being played in conditions that suited them. Bangladesh have enjoyed success when touring teams have been to their home country in recent years. So they earn their opportunity. The challenge here is how do we expand the size of the Women's 50-over World Cup? I think that's really the conversation here. Have we outgrown a tournament that only permits 2 teams to qualify in a tournament like this when we've got the ICC Women's Championship, which now includes Thailand, includes Ireland, of course, has got Bangladesh there, Pakistan there, the Windies there. And then we rule out, because that is the format they play the championship in across the 3-year cycle. And then we get to the tournament that only really matters. Who cares if you've won the ICC Championship? Really, it's there as a qualifying device. It's good that they have it. Terrific the amount of one-day internationals that women now play. Ireland having played, I think, 24 in this last 3-year cycle. That will mean, like it was with Pakistan, their growth will be accelerated for it. But the ICC trophy, it's a bit like, finishing top of the ladder in the AFL season. Who really cares? What matters is winning the flag. And here, what matters is performing at a World Cup. So when do we see this World Cup grow to the same size of the men's tournament, which is now, of course, growing to 14 teams, which is a great thing. But I reckon the women should follow suit.
There's definitely space for that when you see some of the teams that'll be missing out from that qualifying competition. The new world for England women's domestic cricket has begun. This is interesting. You've had a close eye on this during the week. So they had the Tier 2 games last weekend. They started Tier 1 during the week. Daniel Norcross has been commentating on that. Talk us through it.
Yeah, we've been well represented. We had Daniel and Cam commentating on Surrey's opening fixture yesterday, which is really exciting out at Beckenham. I thought it would be worthwhile before we start discussing these games to just overview what this looks like. It isn't that easy to digest before because there are 2 separate competitions running side by side in the 50-over stuff, and that'll repeat when the T20 Blast begins at the end of May. So these are the 50-over list day games. A reminder that there are 8 Tier 1 counties, and that becomes 9 next year with Yorkshire and 10 the year after with Glamorgan, right? Okay. But for this year, it's 8. They're going to play in what they're calling League One, double round robin, so 14 group games, then semi-finals and a final. So that's a proper league. 14 games, throughout the
Home
season.
and away.
They're the best funded
Each
teams,
day.
obviously, because they're in tier one. They've got the resources, they've got the contracted players, and that makes a lot of sense. Tier two, slightly different, fewer professionals or fewer. There's less money in the pot, which is understandable because they're trying to make sure there's an elite pathway here. So that's North Group, South Group, 2 groups of 5, and with that, they play their own group round robin. Then they move over to the semi-finals and the finals. So there is a division between, and that same formula plays out when we get to the blast that runs between the end of May and the end of July. So that's the frame. The Division 1 or the League 1 counties are Durham, Lancashire, Somerset, Hampshire, Warwickshire, Surrey, Essex, and the Blaze. Now, the Blaze, you ask, Jeff, I can hear. Yeah. Remember, so the Blaze were part of the previous regional system.
Yeah.
And Knots, who have been given tier 1 status, have decided to not use Knots as their branding. They're using the Blaze instead. That was agreed late last year. Can someone have a word there? I mean, this to me, this like the whole idea of this, and I reckon it's working, despite the fact that it's going to take a while for people to get their heads around. There was so much buzz online and so many people engaging with this over the last few days. This was the right thing to do, to hand over this elite pathway to the counties, the first-class counties with their existing supporter bases and history and culture and facilities and all the rest. This has been the right call because
fold it in, make it part of the have the stability, the sense of legacy of being a part of the bigger project.
Exactly. So it just seems quirky to me that they would. Look, of course, they're still going to get all the support of Knots, but why not just call yourself Nottinghamshire?
Yeah.
The way that
it's like having the one guy in your team photo who puts the baggy cap backwards. You know, like what do you? This isn't a thing. This isn't a team thing. Not everybody's doing it. You know, or like showing the one person who shows up to the fancy dress party and doesn't bother. Like, or the opposite of that, you show up to a different party in fancy dress. I don't know. You're not reading the room here. The vibe's not right. The time for the Blaze. There was a time for the Blaze. 420 Dank Road, drop by. But it's over. That time's over. That time has passed. It's time for something else. It's time to be a little more sober, a little more grown up.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's the list day comp that's running at the moment. It's pretty busy. They play 8 rounds now, like bang, 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 all the way through until the middle of May. So it's a lot of cricket. Then that's followed by a couple of rounds in July and then 4 rounds in September, then the semis and the final in League and Division 2. It's slightly different as we described before, but still lots of cricket in the next month or so. It's going to be difficult to stay on top of, and that's a good thing, right? There's it's a bit like how in the early years of the WBBL, Jeff, they were doing double round robin with 8 teams, 14 games, and it was difficult to keep a track of how each team was going. But that's what we want, and what semi-professional, as it turns into professional, that they need to have the games of cricket to reinforce that investment. So what's gone on this weekend? In the games that were played yesterday, Essex played Durham. Durham won comfortably by 9 wickets. Susie Bates, 93 not out. What a great signing she's going to be. Surrey were defeated by Somerset in that first game. They got 233 for 7. Alice Davison-Richards top scoring with 57 not out. But our fave, Amanda Jade Wellington, she's the pro at Somerset. She set it up with 3 wickets, and then Heather Knight knocked them down, making 64 and top scoring for Somerset. The Blaze lost to Lancashire. They had 234 chased down after Catherine Bryce made 70 for the Blaze. Emma Lamb made 130 not for Lanc. She's had a terrific couple of years in domestic cricket and, of course, has enjoyed experience with England. And there was a tie. This was the game of the round, Jeff, at Edgbaston. Hampshire, 208. And then Warwickshire, 208 as well from the final ball. Abby Freeborn top scored with 70. And Lindsay Smith, who's a terrific character around the circuit, took 4 for 39. So a tie there. They split the 4 points. And in League 2, I'll just quickly skip through those. Glamorgan beat Sussex by 53 runs. Gloucestershire, a tight win over Derbyshire by 9 runs over at Bristol. Worcestershire pumped Yorkshire by 114 runs. They knocked over Yorkshire for 114. And there was a even bigger win by Northants, defeating Leicestershire by 185 runs, a big century for Michaela Kirk. And Middlesex defeated Kent. They bowled out Kent for 66, which isn't ideal. Yes, they knocked that off 2 down. So it's not going to be the kind of tournament, Jeff, that we can follow as closely as we'd like to, but we'll try and keep on top of the scores at a bare minimum. And we will track this important step in women's cricket in England over the next 6 months.
break coming. Before that, mention for Morris Blackburn, because you don't know what to do when it comes to law. I don't know what to do when it comes to law. This is the beauty of living in a society, is that you diversify the skills that people are good at. You go, okay, you study this, I'll study this. You go figure out how to be a doctor. You figure out how to fix cars. I'll figure out how to write about cricket. All of these things are necessary. Everybody wants all of these things to happen. We specialise. So if you're a person who's not involved in the law, you don't know how it works. If you're a working person, you don't have the time to be reading law books in your downtime in the evening to try to understand what's going on. You need experts. You need experts who are particularly there for workers' rights, not there for the people who want to screw over workers instead. That's the Morris Blackburn idea. That's the core. That's why they set themselves up in 1919 when Maury B himself went, you know what, going to start a law firm and look out for people who need looking out for. And that's why they're still number one today.
Yep, straight after World War One, of course, Anzac Day tomorrow, which is an anchor to that as well. Of course, at the time that this firm started, I remember playing that board game, the Game of Life, Jeff, when you were a kid growing up. And if you spun the highest number, you could be one of three professions: a doctor, a lawyer, or a police officer. But I want to just add to that this is not just about having an encyclopedic knowledge of the law. It's about how they choose to be a lawyer. Once you've got that piece of paper, once you've done that, however many years of study, what sort of law do you want to practice? What sort of person do you want to be? And Morris Blackburn attracts some of the best lawyers in the country who are there for working people, who are there earning a dignified living and doing their thing in the community. And if they run into legal issues, they don't have that 7-year legal degree behind them, and they need the support. They're calling up Morris Blackburn, where they've got offices all around the country, or they're jumping online and finding them, and they're getting people who've chosen to commit to that type of law practice, which I think is really important. So Morris Blackburn Lawyers, number one plaintiff law firm in Australia. Most of their work is no win, no fee, which again goes back to the type of values that the firm has and why we are so proud to be in association with them on The Final Word. Jeff, let's go to that break that you referred to before. On the other side of it, an absolute cracking test match that finished yesterday over in Bangladesh.